Afternoon. Excellencies and dear guests, we join here today to celebrate the 75th birthday of the Danish Cultural Institute. It is indeed an important landmark for our institute, and it is a pleasure to welcome you all here. An important mix of guests when you look over the hall here, from all walks of life, and I'm sure that we all share full awareness of the importance and value of arts and culture in international relations. That's what this assembly have in common. A special welcome to our keynote speakers, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Christiansen, and the Minister of Culture, Bertel Haarder, and all those who will participate in the debates during the afternoon, and hopefully also during the following month and years. This is not just another birthday. We strongly feel that our history and experience, our values, and our operating methods are just as relevant today as 75 years ago. Maybe there's more need for us today than in any other period after World War II. So let's walk back just for a moment in history and see and just find our tracks. In the 1930s, Volmer Visti, who is, so to speak, our founding father, he traveled in the Balkan countries and Poland. The nation branding of those dramatic years were powerful and ugly propaganda, and the whole concept of how the national governments handled international cultural relations was limited to one-way communication without any special attempt of mutual understanding and learning. The consequences, we all know, disaster. A group of concerned Danes with a demography rather much like the one present here at this conference met at the very beginning of World War II. They decided to establish a cultural institute to be operative when the war was over. This was based on a strong belief in fundamental Danish democratic values of openness and the value of continuous learning through dialogue, international and national. Professor Niels Bohr, a famous Danish physicist and Nobel laureate, was one of the founding fathers, and he expressed himself the values and the purpose in the following terms, and I quote. He had a language which was a little bit difficult. What most of all characterizes Danish culture is the ability to unite the openness for learning from the outside world, that we both actively search or is what is brought to us, and at the same time holding on to our own ways and views of life, as these have been shaped by our roots and the destiny that unite us in a world that we are inseparably a part of. Little complicated, Nobel Prize level. But the message is simple. At that time it was and still is that being Danish is being open-minded, based on dialogue and tolerant. But openness does not stand alone. Openness also means openness to dialogue, to learning, and living in relations with others, thus confirming our own openness. The founding of this institute was, when you boil it down to basics, a question of safeguarding and strengthening our own culture through intercultural relations based on dialogue, exchange, and mutual learning. This has been developed ever since, over 75 years, in a format where the Institute today still is a self-governing entity, an arm's length from governance minister, but not tone deaf to political realities. Open and honest dialogue, creating value for both Danish and international partners, has been refined over the years, and so has the business model. We have very limited public funding, 15 million a year, but we triple that funding through our friends in the big Danish foundations and our big business partners and many, many individuals all over the world. I can just mention the creation of the Institute in Riga, financed by individual people with support from both Denmark and Latvia, plus major foundations. Our present institute in Beijing, which is an enormous investment, was helped immensely by many, but especially Lego. And when we open in India, and we do that hopefully soon, we'll have many thanks to go to Carlsberg. When you have and celebrate your birthday, you're allowed to make a wish. And so I will end up by making a wish. The world is certainly different from the 1930s. The challenges are very different and probably more complicated than at that time. The issues have changed, the actors have changed. Today, the issues are mentioned: globalization, inequality, sustainability, migration, terrorism, risk of implosion of the EU, etc. And the actors have changed from a limited number of definable states and men who governed the world to a multitude never seen before. Technologies have changed. Social medias create new communities, but also create numerous problems and risks, both of social exclusion and of propaganda of a viral nature. Walls are, during these periods, torn down. But alas, new walls are being built, and some of them overnight. It is our strong belief and accordingly wish that this conference will set in motion a new debate about how we best can place cultural relation in their rightful place, just not as a small leg at the side of the foreign policy, but also make it part of the very heart of the Danish foreign policy. The Danish Cultural Institute can provide the experience, the values that we share, and the strong identities that are precondition for continued openness. We'll be happy to be part of a new creative process. We wish to ourselves and to Denmark that we make sure we use our limited cultural resources in a more intelligent way. Make sure that we get better coordinated, and that all the various Danish players in the field of international intercultural dialogue unite their efforts more than they do today to safeguard that our cultural values are kept alive through openness and mutual learning dialogue with other nations. Those institutions, agencies, and foundations who work for these values should unite. Our suggestion is to create a new Danish International Cultural Institution, a new Goethe Institute, or maybe a Grundtvig Institute, just to show you what we're thinking about, which in parallel to our colleagues in Germany, in France, and also very much in Sweden, could play a major role in the Danish foreign policy. Foreign policy seems today to be mostly about security and economics. Our wish is to join forces and make Danish cultural values a stronger part of Danish policy. With an arm's length, of course, to government, but under the umbrella of our country's democratic institutions, always. So let's walk together and talk together in the eternal strive for a better world. Thank you. And I have the pleasure to hand over the floor to His Excellency, the Minister of Culture, Bertel Haarder, and when he leaves the floor, it will be taken over by our moderator, Martin Krasnik, who is known by every Dane.